All right, so here we go. Let's take a quick look at this video because it'll help explain a lot of stuff, and I'm sure that it's going to be a lot cooler than me explaining. So, and just a little quick note here, that's a key thing. Let's not misunderstand what the whole concept of denaturalization means. It can happen to anyone. Basically, the ability to change your status from like citizen to non-citizen, or I don't know, like if you get shot, then you're a terrorist, just based on the change of a label. It's important to understand what the stuff means because it very easily could happen to any one of us. Let's continue. So as you can see, they start with the legality, meaning the behind the scenes. You know, when legal things occur, you're not seeing these changes, in your house. When the laws are passed, to raise taxes and things like that, you don't see that at your house. We see the bad things happen until it affects you directly, which is another premise for the point of the podcast, or the goal of activism in general, or the fight for the keeping of human rights for humans or for us, is because there's certain signals that if you're paying attention to the loss of liberties, the loss of freedom, or you see the actual human rights violations in your face, it's definitely in our best interest to pay attention to those things, because when it's lost, it's lost. It's not like you can, gain it back. You don't come back from death. So, let's keep, you see it right there on the screen. This is one of the keys to how we're going to be able to move forward as a human race. The ultimate defense is vigilance. A threat to anyone's rights is a threat to everyone's rights. And I mean, that pretty much says it very plainly. That also emphasizes the analogy of the boat. And to break that down even further, if we're all, or since we're all a part of the human race, a threat to us would be, any one of us taking it upon themselves to actively drill holes into the hull, which would bring in water and essentially sink us all. And that's a very clear example. So it's a threat to all of us, this personal or individual's actions. And, it's a system that's, removing our, that's making these laws or that's pushing these agendas. And, let's not wait till it happens to somebody we know personally. Let's be vigilant and realize that it's all of our rights. All right. So I guess we can say this was our first attempt. We're going to go down and look at some recordings and see how it sounds. Because this whole time it probably wasn't even, or could not have been recording the sound from that page. So we're going to check it out. See you later. All right, folks, welcome to the channel. Thank you for showing up. Shout out to all my folks that survived that first episode. No pictures. Shout out to all my folks that was like, show us your face. That was the first episode, folks, just so you know. Very rough sound quality. I mean, sound like I was in a wind tunnel, but you survived and you made it through. Good job. So I'm sharing my screen here. As you can see, you see one very happy, extremely happy individual. You see a somewhat happy individual right here. And right here in the middle, this big picture he's holding here is Nobel Peace Prize. And for anybody who doesn't understand or know about the Nobel Peace Prize, bring it up to speed. So winning the Nobel Peace Prize means being recognized as someone who has done the most or best work for a fraternity between nations, reducing armies, or promoting peace, Congress, honoring selfless efforts for peace, justice, human rights, diplomacy, and resulting in a medal, diploma, cash prize, and global acclaim. Alrighty, welcome back. This is officially episode 2 of the Diverse Beatdown. Thank you for coming back. I know a lot of you all are surprised. Know a lot of people were like, show us your face. And I was just like, you want to see my face? But anyway, the last video or the last podcast was, in my opinion, very low quality sound. Even when I got to get to my computer and do my adjustments and use AI tools, things kind of still were obviously not the best sound. So I just want you all to know that I'm dedicated to the process of providing high quality content. So there are going to be different mediums that I use to do the podcast. But just so you know, I'm always going to get better equipment. Obviously you didn't even know I had this camera. So I'm fooling a lot of people. A lot of people didn't even think I had it. So, there you go. So today, I want to just lean into the concept of the podcast so everybody knows why we're here and what we're doing here. And even if you didn't see the first episode, that's fine. You could start right now. You're already in the podcast, so you're a part of it. So no need to back out. Essentially, we're in an extremely interesting time period right now. For anybody who's not aware, maybe some people think that stuff's cool, but we're in a very dangerous time right now for anybody who is willfully ignorant because, if we can't get past the political excuses or the uh, religious excuses or the gender excuses, I don't see how any of us is going to survive circumstances where we have a leader that is ruling the country, which we all live in, their beliefs that they've spoken and said, he says that his beliefs are, and I'm speaking about Trump, if anybody didn't know who the leader of this country was, at least via paper. He says that the only thing that can stop him is his morality and his mind. And I thought that was very interesting that those were the two guiding factors of how he operates. So, and just based on the past 14 days of this month of the year of January, or the month of January in the year of 2026, I mean, that pushed me to okay, I have to do this thing. I have to, put these ideas and these thoughts out there to at least do my part in not standing by and watching the erosion of our rights and liberties and, our freedoms and human rights, just our rights. They're being eroded for anybody who didn't know. And okay, so I'll start with this. We have a human ecosystem, and within that human ecosystem, there's so many different factors. Like I said, if you didn't watch or see the podcast or the first episode, I talked about the boat analogy. So I'll talk about that now. So the boat analogy is, as a human race, us as people, we're all on the same boat collectively. And when I say the boat, I'm talking about the human race of human beings that are on this boat. There's no political parties, there's no agendas other than the human race working together for the human race. So we're on the boat and we are born with these drills, just like a drill that you see to do work around the house, a power drill. And, we all have these drills that we have the right to use, in our own way. Like, we could use it in our own way. And some people that are on the boat make choices to drill holes. And obviously, if you drill holes in a boat and, water's going to come in. And that water that's coming into the boat will eventually cause the boat to sink. And that sinking boat will be the destruction of us all. So, that's that concept of the erosion of our liberties and our freedoms and just the erosion of the Constitution. It has much further wider implications. So the drilling of the hole is the violation of the laws that affect us all. The podcast is about that. The podcast is about identifying the holes, and then identifying who is the ones or who is the individuals that are drilling these holes and how that collectively affects us as human beings. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about the political view of any individual. When the water comes into the boat, it will sink us. So, we're going to be focusing on the forensic analysis of these situations. We're basically going to be doing case studies. Within these case studies, we're going to determine the why, the who it's affecting, and then the action plan. And there is no government without the people. There's no way that any society thrives, without people. We are the fuel, we are the driver, we are the force, we are the mechanism that allows these government officials to even take position because we are the ones that vote for them. And, when you look out and you're seeing politicians debate and talk about different things, the things that they're talking about affect us. And, if you was to ask a politician to, look into these things or, hey, could you get the crime or could you get the crime to stop or something in my neighborhood? It's not really like they have the ability to just go in there and do it if they want to. They could, but the society that we live in is so much not based on, the morality and do the right thing, don't be a douche. Pretty much you see it. You see everybody sees it when you go out and you're interacting with people who are obviously unconcerned with other people. And, we all have the ability to learn and grow and take accountability. We all have that ability. And, it's just common sense. There's this theory that when people do something wrong, let me just pull it up so I can give you all the accurate information because it's cool to, say stuff off the dome. So before I get into that, I'll just say like the Democrat Republican connection or comparison. When you talk about that, you'll say the Republicans will say, well, excuse me, I'll just say it like what is actually going on. Because if you look around, I guess you could say the Democrats are the ones that's actively for the shits. I mean, I saw the Democrats, the Republicans were the one that it was people from the Republican Party that got up on live TV and said to other people the Renee Good situation wasn't a murder, it was self-defense. They're actively with the shits on the crime. If Trump's the ringleader and the mob boss, they're like right there with him. They're the ones that are, they enforce it. They'll do whatever it takes. And I'm going to think now, it just seems like this guy's probably like a badass behind the scenes. Like Trump actually must have put hits on some people at some point in time because where would this fear come from? Why are they so afraid? Why are you so afraid? I mean, I'm not personally afraid of Trump, not in a physical or, not in any kind of way, any kind of sense of the word. I'm not afraid of him or what he could do because most of what he's done, everybody has seen it. So and if anybody didn't know, he's only still president and he's only not taking on getting any charges or wanting to stay president so hard right now because as soon as he's not president, that's when that immunity, which you have when you are president of the United States, people can't bring up past charges against you. So like if he was to, be accused of rape like he was that time when he was doing those pageants, if that would happen now, it'd be different because it's something that happened now. The charges that they're trying to bring up against him are things that have happened allegedly before he became president of the United States. And, hey man, it's not okay. So the Republicans are actively, on board, openly lying and going with the crime. And then you got the Democrats, saying, in a nutshell, I've heard a lot of different things. I think Al Green, which I didn't know he was a senator until I saw his video. There are some Democrats that are coming out and speaking up and saying, hey, that sucks. Don't do that. You guys suck. Where's the video? But essentially what the Democrats are saying, hey guys, that's not me, that's them. It's those guys. Those are the guys that are making shit suck. So, I mean, that's just not good enough for me. I mean, as far as for me to look at them as a source of, hey, maybe they'll figure this out or we'll get out of this. So the Renee Good connection is when she was murdered, that murder or the part of the government that aspect or that group of people, but largely the Republican Party, which supports and enables that particular group to do what they're doing, aka drill the holes, aka murder Renee Good in cold blood. That's not just the tragedy of, her life. It's a tragedy for us all as far as the human race. Um, I mean, that doesn't work for me in regards to that being the society that I'm in. And I'm a part of a society that condones and supports and enables and justifies that kind of action. You know, I could think about any one of my loved ones or anybody that I care about or anybody that, you know, any human being. I wouldn't want them to lose their lives unjustifiably, but on top of the unjustifiable killing, to be slandered and your name dragged through the mud, and tarnished, you know. And I mean, that can't be how you go out. You can't be expected to go out like, you know, this is what happened. I mean, you get murdered and it was your fault. You shouldn't have tried to, what do they say? It sucks to suck. That's what they're saying. Well, we gotta, what the other issue, or I won't even say issue is, but what the thing is that I want to do with the podcast is get different perspectives. You know, I've already put this out there to all the potential feeds and podcast distribution sites. But beyond that, I want to hear from the community. I want to hear from you all. I want to get the feedback from you all. Welcome back to the channel, folks. If it's your first time, you're with your host, Toren Hasmore. This is Diverse Beatdown. This is the Diverse Beatdown. So we got a very unique presentation today. I thank everybody for making it through that first rough episode. Your soldiers, every last one of you, bunch of soldiers. Because it was rough. It was some bad quality sound. I was dropping F-bombs like it was no tomorrow. And, you know, I'm going to keep that in mind and be more conscientious. So I was out today and I was thinking about the Wonder Years. And a lot of people would, you know, if you up there in age like me, you remember the TV show The Wonder Years. And in this show, it was pretty much like the basic, you know, the basic household. You had the mom, you had the dad, and you had two sons. And all this is to say is there has to be some reason or some way to track back to the source of what we're experiencing. So, you know, the Wonder Years for a certain group of people is the time when stuff was easy. You know, the time when, you know, you ain't had to work that hard, you know. You got more than you put in. And for some people, that was sweet. For some people, they was okay with taking more than they was given. And over time, I mean, obviously, that's going to turn into a bad thing. You know, certain tribes of Indians that would not stay in one location for more than an allotted amount of time because they didn't want to overuse the resources and, you know, one, make them not available for somebody else, but also so that when they, you know, go on their travels, you know, they would travel in, you know, in like a certain path. And then over time, they would come back to this place and, you know, the place that they didn't over pillage, you know, provided resources for when they came back or when they needed them the most. The Wonder Years was a hallucination. You know, anybody that looks back at, you know, some of the toughest, most brutal, unjust times that we've experienced and survived as humans, if anybody looks back at that level of horror and torture to be the Wonder Years, by any stretch of the imagination, is extremely out of touch. The loss of the community and erosion of family are not cultural accidents. They are the calculated results of an economic system designed to extract wealth from the hull of the boat. Another boat reference for everybody or anybody that doesn't remember or doesn't know about the boat reference. What we're talking about is us as a human race. We're all on the same boat together. You know, we're all in this together. You know, y'all have heard that. We're in this together. We're all in this together. And it's true. I mean, it's a true statement. You know, we're all in this together. You know, the human race is in the same boat, floating along, you know, out there in space. Big old boat. And people that want to put money first, put non-human interests first, are the ones that are drilling holes in the boat. The people that are pro dropping nuclear bombs on people because they disagree with each other. That's putting a hole in the boat, folks. I mean, if you didn't know, that's a huge boat, or excuse me, a huge hole to put in the boat. So I've done some research to break down the structure of this myth of the past and how today we're experiencing the constitutional reality of these believed myths. So let's start with between the 1945 or between the 1940s and the 1970s. Supposedly was the golden age of nuclear families, unlocked doors, and shared prosperity. And the first hole in this boat is the contract or law that was passed through Congress. And this particular law that was passed through Congress is EO 9066. You know, this is when they used to talk about the good old days. But this is where they began the ultimate betrayal towards humanity in general, because what happens to one of us happens to us all, regardless of the space that people try to put between them and the reality of it. You know, you're a part of the human race. So if it happens to a human, it's happening to you too. So in 1942, an executive order 9066 stripped 120,000 people of their rights solely based on ancestry. 2/3 were U.S. citizens. So they've been doing it since the beginning of time. Since even there was a constitution, they've used and found, the system has used and found opportunities and ways to justify the taking away or the removing of one's inherent rights, you know, for whatever reason. I mean, we don't need to get into the reasons, you know, because does reason really matter when it's wrong? Does it matter? You know, are people really concerned about, you know, why they lost their job for reasons that were, you know, just? I don't think people care. Rights are not rights if they can be taken away. They are temporary privileges. So if you get to stay up late, you know, some nights, you know, the fact that you get to, you know, that right there tells you that is something that was given to you. And if it can be given to you, it can be taken away. Hold that thought. So I just want to follow up on that last part. I got a little cut off there. We were continuing down the road of the Wonder Years. Super, super, very important to factor in all these changes along the way, because these systematic changes that occur, they happen over a period of time, and it's very subtle. Some things not so subtle. You know, you see somebody get picked up off the street and thrown into the back of a truck. You know, that's not so subtle. But adjusting, you know, paperwork and, you know, being able to basically modernize these tactics and make it a normal thing. You know, it was I don't know, my first job, I was working at Wendy's and I was making like $6.50, and I was happy as heck, man. I mean, I was having a really good time because I never made money. It was my first job, but you know, just making money. I mean, it was just a very, very liberating thing that occurred. So when we talk about the Wonder Years, what we're really trying to say is, if somebody was to say to you, or if they was to ask you, you know, what was the best time of your life? You know, when you think about your past, you think about, you know, your best times. You know, some of the best times that we can imagine and some of the best times that we have are definitely directly related to good times. You know, and we say good, you know, we're talking about, you know, what happens to us. But, you know, the best case scenario is for us to get back to the community mindset, the mindset that's focused on how we can accomplish goals. Or, you know, if there's something going on, we'll be like, well, we have a problem. And it's super important that we understand that if we don't do that, then, you know, we're adding to the already difficult system. You know, all systems need to be checked. And if, you know, if something is a good system, it can sustain a push. And when I say a push, you know, like if you want to test the quality of a chair, you know, you want to sit in it to be able to see if it's a good chair. You know, somebody said to you that it was a good chair, and, you know, you couldn't sit in it to check it. Like the only way that you couldn't check to see if it was a good share. And, it's kind of hard to judge anything if you can't check it. And, we need to continue to have that same energy. We can't not check systems. Like when you buy something or we make purchases, we, go online and we look at what we want to buy. I mean, if you're like me, you read the reviews, right? And those reviews that we take a look at determine that if, it's something that we want to be a part of. And if you see a whole bunch of bad reviews, if a product has tons of bad reviews, then we're not going to be able to justify a purchase if we purchased it knowing that it has been used by other humans and it didn't work for them. Maybe some things don't work for others. One man's trash is another man's treasure. That's cool. But what if it's everybody's trash? I mean, that's something interesting to take a look at. And one of my favorite sayings is, you can't pick a piece of shit up from the clean side. You just can't. We talked about the loss of families, the two-parent households. It doesn't have anything to do with a picket fence, but like today, I think people would just want food and a place to live. I don't think it has nothing to do with the picket fence and the old school version of, the American dream. So one of the main things we should be focused on as a people or as a group is to restore the family, and it should be the centerpiece of our lives. Because if we don't start with family and we just try to, change what's going on somewhere else, if we can't fix it in our own home, then the likelihood that we're going to make change in our community or in our town is a huge sign of hubris. But we got to battle the tax or the different taxations that are coming at us as far as the cutting of the Medicaid, SNAP benefits, which directly relate to, you could say low income households, but it affects households, right? I mean, I think we need to get beyond this. If it doesn't happen to me, it doesn't affect me. I'd like to believe that we have more potential as a species than to just fall into or be prey to ignorance in a time where, we have more access to information than we've ever had in known history. The patriarchy and the ruling claim to protect the family, yet they support policies that force families into economic depression. They want the authority of the father, not the well-being of the child. We got to put kids first. We got to put children first because the children are our future. And I'm not trying to, be funny, but, we got to start there. Where are children at? Children are in the homes. Where could we be most effective and teach them the most? In the home. How can we help them to be able to prepare themselves on how to best maneuver in the world we live in the home? And leading by example, in the home is very important. The elimination of Head Start, that affects over 1 million kids. This is one of those obvious holes in the boat that we were talking about. There is holes being drilled in the boat, water's coming in, and, the families that are in need of these programs, like these benefits, that we should be trying to at least help you out as a collective society. There shouldn't be over 1 million people sleeping outside every night in America. I mean, that's outrageous. So, we talk about the wonder years, when it felt stable. Things felt stable for a few. So those were the wonder years that they were talking about for a few. So a lot of us, we have no knowledge of the wonder years that they're speaking of other than the TV show with Fred Savage, so that's what that's all about. Since that time when that 30% of the population was, experiencing the most successful and comfortable times of their life, the group of, we're going to break it into two groups. You got Group A, which is the boss class, or the ruling class, or the class with the most access to opportunities. And then you got the Group B, which is the working class. The working class is the majority. Most people work, actually physically leave the home to do labor or are involved in commerce. And, over time, that first group, Group A, they didn't want to have the middle class or the working class, be a part of the process of even making it to the upper class. You can see it in different situations where, I don't know, toxic waste or a biochemical plant is put into a neighborhood or a town that was built by, the group A, and they don't live in that town, but the adverse effects to that community, whether it be the environment, whether it be loss of jobs, or whatever the case may be, the taxes increase, whatever it costs, the payment or the cost or the taxation falls onto the people. So, who's going to pay that bill? The people. The privatizing of commons, the loss of the community, the Patriot Act in 2025 with surveillance, losing your privacy to a certain extent, which we're still, dealing with that. Rights existing only if you can afford them. These are all three separate wholes. Like if you can't get justice unless you can afford it, then justice isn't real. And what we want as people is justice for all. And justice, because justice means that it matters that you were wronged or there was some type of crime, and the people who committed the crime need to pay, so that the whole system, which we call the justice system, means something. If the justice system doesn't mean anything, then there's no hope for anybody. And that's why we're here. We aren't just taking on water, folks, in our boat. The leaders of the executive branch has declared that pumping water out is an act of treason. So if you see the water coming into the boat and you're like, hey, man, it's messed up over here, we need to get this water out, and you try to rally to get some people together to, get the water off the boat, I mean, you might be labeled a terrorist, man. So let's get into what we can do. So we should be working on building a community. Now, when I say a community, let's start with who we know. We need to start building a community in our homes, obviously, but with our family members. Get your list in a group together of the top 10 people that you are involved in with, and make sure that you have reliable resources that you could be able to, if you needed to share with each other. And resources could just be information. Resources could just be, hey, how you doing? Make sure you build these strong relationships with at least 10 people in your life, just so you can be able to say that you're doing your part. And if everybody had a team of 10 and we just kept building that, then eventually we would all be teammates. Maybe we could all have universal health care if we all pitched in, not just some people. I mean, I think everybody should be pro people being able to be seen by healthcare professionals for preventative care, not just when you get shot or, I don't know, getting beat up on your way home for not looking American. I don't know. Working together. Get a part of different institutions like the ACLU, We should be trying to figure out and pay attention to what's happening in our community. That's what this show is about. That's what this podcast is about. I want to hear from everybody. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear what's going on in your community. Always check for more episodes. We're going to be doing this regularly. I'm not going to be doing episodes on this basis where you're like, oh, every Friday, every Thursday. I want to do episodes every day if I can. I also have a life. I got stuff going on. But this is my passion, to be able to do the research, find out where the holes are, and find out how we can not sink ourselves. I mean, I don't want that. I don't want that for people I don't know. And I think that most people, they don't want that for anybody. Nobody wants somebody to be hurt unnecessarily or at all. I don't think any one of us is pro innocent suffering. Those times are gone. The times where 30% of the population in America dictated the feelings and emotions and actual realities of the majority of the population of this country. I think once we can put all that other stuff down, stop carrying all that stuff, these different labels. Let's put the labels down and let's focus on the one label, which would be human. And then let's start with that one word after that, dignity, not profit, not capital gain, not revenue. You can't put a price on a life. You just can't. Trying to figure out the price on a life is trying to justify drilling a hole in the boat. So thank you again for joining me on this podcast. You've been listening to the Diverse Beatdown. I'm your host, Toren Hasmore. And until next time, do your best to not be bugged out. And if you see somebody being bugged out, call them out. But call them out in a way that's professional. Let's call people out professionally. Let's not give anybody any reasons. Let's do it in a way that is smart and we get our point across. And let's do it in a way that actually gets the job done, right? Let's focus on doing it in a way that gets the job done. Like if you like, subscribe if you're a subscriber. But most importantly, send me your thoughts about what's going on in your community. Tell me about what's going on in your town. Tell me particular injustices that you see going on. Tell me what is like very, very important to you individually, because anybody that does, you're automatically uh, what's it called? What's the top line? You're also automatically a platinum member uh, in the human society. So you get first dibs. Everybody that writes in gets first dibs. And if you would like, put in there that you want it read aloud. I'll read your questions aloud, and we'll get directly into incorporating that into how that thing affects all of us. Because whatever you would write, if it's some injustice that you see on your side of town or in your nation or in your community, I guarantee that that injustice that you see has the potential to and does have the potential to affect us all. So, thank you, my peoples.